Hey, gun people. Gonna do a crazy cop story here. Trying to get out of the wind. It's a little bit nippy out here this morning. Texas shoot, it was nice and hot yesterday, and it's like 56 out here now. I thought I'd get away with just a, I can't even see if I'm on that damn screen. Between the sun. Shit. I'm assuming I am. Let's see, if I get by that damn edge of the road there, I should be on. I'm pretty sure if I get right here, you can see this. I'm in the screen. So hopefully you can hear me. So, this is about, damn, I mean a 45 shell. So, this is about Napa Valley College. And when you go to a police academy, they like to use terms like high stress. Some will use low stress. But the more militaristic kind of wannabe basic training academies, they call it high stress. LAPD started it a long time ago. And then LASO and a lot of your other agencies, SEC, I think SO might be high stress. But the term high stress basically means they're going to harass you, they're going to do shit to you, they're going to try and trip you up, they're going to put stress on you from all different angles in order to try and break you or recognize deficiencies or whatever. I think high stress academies are bullshit. An academy is supposed to be a learning environment. Sure you need discipline, sure you need paramilitary, sure you need chain of command, etc. But these high risk or these high stress academies, it's just a keyword for basically wannabe military guys to go out and abuse cadets and kind of feel important and powerful. I don't think it's a good learning environment. I don't like it. Napa Valley College, I don't know if they still are, but in the 90s they were considered a high-stress academy. And I used to teach out there. I was an instructor, and I didn't play that high-stress shit. I mean, when I went in to teach something, I want you to learn, I want to exchange information. I mean, I don't want you standing at attention, yes sir, up to, give me push-ups, do all that, and in the middle of a classroom. The colleges, most colleges are run, or most academies are run by colleges because they're accredited and you get credit for it. Therefore, there's a syllabus, there's certain things you have to meet, there's testing, there's evaluation, there's grades, there's a pass, fail, etc. And you get college credits for it. So it's an academic type environment. It's not a military. It shouldn't be, in my opinion. So anyway, in my career, I've written 2 letters and turned in 2 cops that I thought were really dirty. One was Jeff Reisig, that dirty DA, and I say he's a cop because he was in law enforcement, he was in a prosecution team, he was the highest law enforcement guy around. So I did a letter on him because he did dirty shit trying to hide evidence and a bunch of other things. And then I did a letter on this lieutenant, and probably his captain too, but it was more on lieutenant in academy at Napa Valley. Napa Valley is run by the fish cops, Fish and Game. So Fish and Game teaches their academy at Napa Valley. Well, because of that, Napa Valley gets money, they get resources, they get instructors. The problem when a PD runs their academy is they teach their way what they think is right. Okay, and when you have your fish cops, most of your cops that write tickets and that don't do what I call real cop work out there dealing with real bad guys in a high-risk situation with guns, gangs, and your life's in danger, most cops that don't do that tend to be your big ego, macho, always trying to prove how bad they are to cover up their fear because they really can't do real police work. And Fish and Game's a prime example. I mean, there's some good guys in Fish and Game, there's good guys in all agencies. But, for the most part, Fish and Game wants brainwashed idiots that will just go out there and follow their company line. So I have almost zero respect for Fish and Game because the people in charge have this mentality of, well, we work to the top and you damn lowlifes better listen and you better not question. If we tell you to do something, you should do it blindly and you shouldn't think. You should just follow orders and follow the book and go out there and get stats and seize property and write tickets for people. I mean, this freaking country we live in, you can get a freaking ticket and lose your car and all your equipment for not having a hunting license, but you don't need a license to come into the country. You can just walk across the border and get free aid. But anyway, I digress. So Napa Valley College. So when I went through the academy there, I was I was a supervisor. I was tech or master sergeant in the Air Force at the time, and the Air Force paid because I got Officer of the Year for the county or whatever. So the Air Force said, we're going to send you to the academy on our dime, we're going to pay you, and we're going to send you to the civilian academy. So that's how I went to the academy. Well, because I was older, a little more experienced, and I was an instructor at the academy, I didn't really need the in-your-face yelling, you're a punk, blah, blah. But the rules were in high-stress academy, instructors were gods. You had to bow, you never questioned. When they walked down the hallway, you snapped to attention and stood. You always said good morning. You started with sir and no sir. And okay, a little discipline, I'm okay with a little bit. But, I mean, that academy just went way overboard. I was just like, are you, and I had never seen this as an instructor because I just go out there for an hour or two, teach a class, you know, different classes depending on what I'm teaching, whether it's defensive driving or useful, I can't remember the different subjects I taught. But I would go out there, I would teach my class. I know the students were like scared and, sir, yes, sir, and they were so rigid. And I was like, yo, guys, relax. I'm here to, you need to be able to talk to me. Don't worry about offending me. Let's get the information across. So I never really saw it till I went through the academy, and then I saw how they treated these people, and I was just like, and then what I did the letter on when I complained on this cop is there was a lieutenant out there, Greg, what was his last name? Dorf or something, I don't remember. But he was a lieutenant with Fish and Game, and he just thought he was God's green gift to the world, and he was just Mr. Macho, and he taught weaponless defense, and you know he was always bragging about how the fish police have more authority than you regular cops. He knew I was working at the time part-time at Vallejo while I was still in the Air Force, so you know he was a little intimidated by somebody who kind of could call bullshit on some of his stuff. Because the instructors, again, when you have this high-stress academy and instructors are gods, they don't want anybody question them. They don't want anybody having more knowledge. They want to brainwash you and have you fear and respect. And then they'll pass you and they'll say, oh yeah, he was a good student. He'll be a good cop. He was a good team player. Well, they didn't say that about me. But anyway. So some of the things that went on in this academy just really, I mean, I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So this lieutenant was running around to the female cadets and he would brag about it. He would inspect them when we were standing at attention. He'd get close and rub against their tit. And then he'd go brag in the back room about how he was rubbing on this girl's tits and she can't say nothing. He was married. He was screwing cadets in the parking lot. I mean, he was just a piece of shit. So I didn't like him. I thought he was an unethical thing. Besides the fact I thought he was a macho, I think I'm all this because I'm at the academy. Then you get him out in the real world in the streets, and he's probably a little coward that would hide behind a tree while everyone else is getting shot. So I didn't like him just because I thought he was a freaking weasel, because anybody that's got to use their position and power to get, when you're married, to go out and have sex and get women, cheat on your wife and do all that bullshit, I got no respect for, I got no time for. So what he did in his personal life, I didn't care, but using that job and affecting these cadets, and I mean, I had female cadets come to me because I was kind of the older guy, kind of like, hey man, you know, what do you do if I complain? They'll screw me, and they say if you complain, they'll trash you and you'll lose your job. And then if I don't get this certificate, if I don't pass, I don't get this raise, or they'll move me to a different job. So there was a lot of pressures on people. And I watched them run out a couple of good people. I mean, these guys had bachelor's degree. One guy was a doctor. I mean, there were some good, educated people that were like, hey, I'm not here to get, you know, roll around in the mud. And there was one incident that I put in my letter that really offended me. That when they were teaching deadly force at the academy, the instructors were playing their little military games. It was cold. Napa Valley gets kind of cold, especially if you're in California and you're acclimatized to that area. And so the wind blows, and it was raining, and the wind was blowing, and it was cold for California. It was very cold. So they had us go out there and do push-ups in the rain, out on the pavement, stand there with our arms while they're walking around underneath the shade. Are you guys cold? Or you know, playing their little BS games, trying to be in the military. None of them were in the military. None of them had military experience. They just like, you know, watch a couple movies and then come in here and play this at the academy. So they're doing all this bullshit, and so when we go in to do the class, the instructor who's teaching deadly force, about 8 or 10 people are in the back of the room just shivering. And I mean, they can barely stand up. And the instructors are walking around laughing like, ha ha ha, look at them, it's cold, ha ha ha. And I was so offended. I was like, are you kidding me? And I talked to the director, what was his name? Bruce Beckler, I think. He's dead now, he died of cancer. And he knew they were a piece of shit, but he couldn't say anything. He told me on the side, look man, they give money, I can't run out, I can't be the director of this college and end up running off an agency that was here before I was here. They've been running it, they get money, I can't really tell him no. So he knew this shit was, so I held him just as accountable. I was like, you know what, that's fucking cheesy. You're a piece of shit too. But anyway, so they're laughing and they're doing all this, and I explained to him that I thought it was bullshit, and because I explained to him, he called me in attention, and he's in my face, well, Cadet Gord, what do you think? You think you could just run because you're an instructor? Do you think you don't have to follow the run? And I mean, he was just in my face. So I'm standing here like this, and I started rocking on my heels because I just wanted to knock his ass out. And so then he got all offended. Oh, you're knocking on your heels? You know that's aggressive? You know that's body language for aggressive? If I was on the streets and you did that, I'd take you down on the ground. I was like, okay, whatever. And man, I mean, it was... I thought they were going to kick me out of the academy, but at that point I was like, look, I'm not going to play this shit. I'm going to take a stand for what I believe in. So I chilled out. They kind of threw some shit at me. They were kind of trying to flunk me on a couple scenarios and kind of trip me up, but whatever. I held my tongue. I took notes, and at the end of the academy, after I graduated, so they couldn't say, oh, he just did this letter because if I did the letter, they would kick me out and say I failed, and then they would say, well, he only did this letter because he failed. It's political. It's vindictive, whatever. So that's how the government will usually get you, is they try. So when you go against the government, you have to understand that you have to make it to where they can't use the thing that it's just vindictive. So I graduated academy, took a couple awards, graduated in the top whatever percent, and so they couldn't say that I did this letter because I failed the academy. So I graduated, I did it, and then I turned in a letter. Before I turned in the letter, I turned in my letter of resignation. And I went into this guy and I go, hey, you ain't going to be happy. I'm doing a letter to the college and the post to Peace Officer Standards on some of the shit I saw here. I think it's dangerous. I think it's unfair. You ran people out. You know, another thing about High Stress Academy is they love to say how many people they kick out. Somehow they think, because, you know, the Navy SEALs has a 75% washout rate. So everybody who doesn't understand high standards and the washout rate now seem to think that, well, if we kick out a lot of people, then people will think we're like the Navy SEALs and we got high standards, and that's why people can't pass us, because they can't meet our standards. Well, it's bullshit. But anyway, so they used to brag about how many people, they had a 50% washout rate. So if you graduate our academy, you're the best of the best, you're this, you're that. And I was like, you know, I don't need all this bullshit. Just give me the education, let me pass the test, let me do the standard and get my certificate. So I wasn't into all that. And they didn't like that because the academy, some of the guys that were there either knew me or knew that I was a cop or had worked with me or knew I was out the base. So they kind of knew that I was having what was called an informal leadership position. I wasn't in charge of anybody, but informally a lot of people looked to me because I was the older guy and I kind of made sense. And I was like, I don't agree with this. This is bullshit. So another thing they did one time was when the people passed their test, instead of giving out your test saying your results, they would crumble it up and say, you guys suck, these test scores. They crumbled them all up on a ball and they just dumped them all over the floor. Said, you got 5 minutes to find your test and get outside. So you had all these people who were going to be cops crawling around the floor, opening up paper, this ain't mine, this ain't mine, this ain't. And I looked at him and I went, you know what? The last one there I guess will be mine. Because I just wasn't going to crawl around the floor like a freaking idiot. Well, of course, I wasn't a team player. I was being an obstructionist. I was being a negative influence on the people that were crawling around on the floor. But anyway, when I left out of there, I did this big letter. I turned in the academy. I said, look, there's some serious issues here. The things that should be important here, like deadly force, the most important thing that people ought to learn, you shouldn't have people standing around wet, shivering in the back of the room, not listening to the class, not being able to interact with the instructor. They're back there playing these silly-ass games from these fish cops who have never really been cops, who want to play Mr. Military, and I would do. So I turned in this guy, and those are the only 2 letters I did. When I turned in Jeff Reisig, that dirty DA, for hiding evidence and trying to get a guy convicted off bullshit evidence and tainted evidence, he tried to contact the guy at the department and tried to say in my hearing, when we went to court in front of the judge, in my hearing he was like, well, he's done this before. He turned in a lie. And of course the academy was like, oh, you know what, all his allegations weren't true. None of that was happening. If I knew that was happening, I would... You know, when you call government out and they get caught, unless you got video, and even if you have video, they're going to say, well, I wasn't aware of that, and we've taken steps to correct it. So they did all this Mickey Mouse tap dancing around the shit, and a couple, 3 years later, Beckler, the guy in charge, ended up getting fired. and he left, and I think he went down to Sacramento, and I ran into him later before he died. I heard he had cancer and he died, but I ran into him before, and he was like, oh, you know, nice now that I was out, and I was a cop, and I was taking, I think I was doing an instructor for weaponless defense class, and he was all like, hey, you know, that letter I understand, but you need to understand, you know, when I was there, those guys were kind of running, and he knew they were wrong, but he would never say it officially because it would make him look bad because he knew it. And so Reisig tried to use that letter saying, you know what, he lied about this other cop before, so this is a trend. I go, really? I was sitting there for the judge, I go, that's a trend? I said, I've been a cop for 30 years, I've done 2 letters, one was 15 years ago and one's now, and both the cops were dirty. And that's a trend that I just make shit up about cops. So the government will always try and paint it. That was the other time that I really stood up and I said, hey, enough's enough. I document it. I mean, if it didn't document it, it didn't happen. My letter was on there, and they cost me a couple jobs. A couple agencies that I applied for, they contacted the police academy, and the academy goes, you know what, he's not a team player, you can't trust him, he turned in some cops, he said some things that weren't true. That's the big thing, because when you can't prove something, whether it's true or not, the party that you're accusing can always say, he's lying and that's false. It's a false accusation. If you can't prove it, legally it's called a false accusation. So, you know, their defense is, prove it. You know, prove that, you know, what, am I going to go get 8, 10 people out of the academy that have jobs with the police department that somehow are going to put their careers in jeopardy by going against the system and saying you made them do this just to make a point that I was right on this? Look, I told you the problem. If you don't want to fix it, I don't really care. So I don't know what Napa Valley's at like now. I don't know if it's still high stress, but anytime you hear high stress academy, you see this shit on TV where they're playing this militaristic BS, I don't like it. I don't buy into it. An academy should be about learning. It needs to be about survival, especially when you're teaching something as serious as deadly force, case law, how to use deadly force, how to justify deadly force, these things. You know, that was another crazy cop story that I had, and I think I might have mentioned it before about Napa Valley College, but and there's plenty of colleges out there that uses high stress. Again, LAPD was one, but it's very close-knit. When you go to LAPD Academy, you're at LAPD. You can't talk about it until you leave, and you know, normally 10, 20 years later, there's so much other shit that happens in your career. Everybody don't give a shit about the academy, and to be honest, I don't really give a shit either. But it's still wrong, and it should be corrected, and there should be rules in place. But you know, like all things in government, you get power, and it's not checked, and nobody can question it because they use words like team player and tearing people down, and they need to learn how to trust, and they need to learn how to work under stress, and they should be able to listen to a deadly force thing even though they're out there shivering and cold, because they're going to be cold when they're out on the job. So you can justify all this bullshit, you know, like most things, you know, in cop work. It's all about wording and how you justify it. All right, so we'll end that there.